Hey, welcome back, everybody. And it is me, Brandon, and him, Calen, up for another edition uh, of In the Chute. What do you got for us, Calen?
All right. So last episode, we actually talked about natural horsemanship, and this is kind of along the same lines, but it's different. So, what is the difference between breaking a horse and training a horse?
Yeah, the difference between natural horsemanship and not.
Uh,
So, yeah, when I was a kid, early on, there was some natural horsemanship going on. I mean, my grandpa's dad, Grandpa Yates, certainly, my mom's dad, certainly was very, very good, very accomplished horseman, very good trainer, very good teamster. I mean, he could do anything, and he was very, very good at it. And those horses trusted him. But Grandpa Wayne, not quite as much. He was a little rougher and tended to dominate a horse more than and admitted that later on in later years when he was not training anymore and your grandpa and I were training and he said that he said, well, you guys are doing stuff with these horses we never dreamed of doing because they were dominating the horse and if they had to be rough with them, so be it. That's what they did. So that becomes a term of horse breaker where even as a young kid, I got the image of when you're breaking a horse, you're maybe bucking them out even purposely to try to dominate them and just get that out of them. And
like
you
those
got to be good enough to do it.
those classic John Wayne movies where they're like, I think it's Cowboys, where he's like, you got to ear him down, and he's like biting the horse's
Right.
ear, and then they're jumping the little kid on it, and they're like, all right, hold
Right.
on tight. Yeah.
Yeah. Lonesome Dove was another one where that you know, uh, God, what was the name of it? Hell Bitch, which is actually a gelding in the movie. It was crazy, but yeah, I was like, that's not a mare. Anyway, that's breaking a horse, and that's subduing them to the point that they just give up. And that's what horse breaking is. Horse training is when you are, in my opinion, uh, doing everything but that, but you're using the natural behavior of the horse, the natural herd behavior, the natural horse instinct to get them to do what you want, and you know ingrain that in through repetition, and then you're getting a animal that is much much more likely to work with you. They're not afraid of you, and I mean they like the work. After a while, they begin to really like going out and doing things as long as you don't hurt them. You're not overdoing it because you've done that. I've had the opportunity to be on some really rough and hard ride, and that horse is like, you know what, not quite what I wanted, and so they'll be a little bit less than helpful about coming in, but they get over that too, and but still they trust you and work with you, and that's the difference between training and breaking. One I think is just a hard um, subjugating of that animal, and the other one is working with it with their natural tendencies. You're still subjugating them, but not with fear and intimidation.
So, I know a lot of times people ask, "Oh, you break horses?" And I always reply,
Right.
"Yep, I train horses." Because a lot of the times I think people don't really understand that connotation. It's
Yeah.
it's similar, but it's not. And I'm like, I train horses. I don't break them.
Right. Well, and I'll a lot of times I'll reply, no, I fix them. I don't break them.
There you go. Yeah,
You
that's a good
know,
one too.
uh, and so yeah, they don't necessarily know, and they don't know the difference because horse breaker is a term, and there's some guys that fancy themselves quite the horse breakers because it
Mhm.
sounds good. It sounds more Hollywoodish or some kind of a
Cowboy.
Western, yeah, mystique about it, and to me it's not. I mean, hey, if you can ride one of them things that are you know pounding you into the dirt or trying to, more more power to you. I mean, they probably you did well in rodeos too, I'm sure. And then there's some guys that are like that I know of, but I was never that good a rider. I think I'm not built to be a really really good bronc rider. I can hold my own, but they can get ahead of you too pretty fast. And I'm not on them for points. I'm on them to get a job done and make it work
Right.
and not scare them. I mean, it's a whole different deal that way. If a horse, if you get one that challenges, yeah, and he's a puss head about it, yeah, I'm gonna pull his head around and I'm gonna spank him a little bit, and then I'm gonna forget about it. I'm not gonna pick on him anymore. A lot of times, guys will pick on a horse to try to make them blow up so that then they can correct them. Well, what good did that just do? You just
Right.
taught that horse to be bad, or you made that expectation. So, lot of difference, a large difference in that. But you're right, people don't necessarily understand, um, the difference between cowboy and horseman.
Well, and you're making me think about something. Everybody always says, "Oh yeah, that horse bucked on me." Like, was it really a buck or was it a crow hop? That's one of your
Exactly.
questions. And can you
Right.
explain the difference between a buck and a crow hop?
Well, a crow hop is just that. It's when they just kind of leap forward and their front feet hit and their hind feet land at the same time. They're just kind of watching, like when you watch a crow and they just kind of bounce around. When a horse does that, that's a crow hop, and that's where that comes from.
They just got two extra legs. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. They're just kind of bouncing up and down like Tigger a little bit. When they're bucking, they are reaching out, and then that hind end comes up in the air, and they're kicking out, and they're twisting and they're turning. That's a buck, and you can ride a crow hop pretty
Yeah.
easily, unless they get you occasionally. But
Darting side to side with a
sometimes,
zigzag.
yeah, you can, when they're doing that now, they're starting to buck a little bit. But just a crow hop is just kind of bouncing around a little bit, and you'd have to be pretty unaware when that happened to fall off or get, and really that's what you would be doing, is falling off, because they're not bucking you off.
Yeah.
They don't have enough force. And I've seen some, believe me, I've seen some horses crow hop pretty dang well too. Your grandpa was on one time, and that horse could go in the air, and he was just pile driving. And he told me, he says, I can't get this horse over this, and he's just crow hopping, but man, does he pound you. He just pile drive you. And he got on him. We were going so far, and sure enough, he was so predictable. And I watched it. Man, my dad's head was just snapping back and forth. I was like, "Whoa!" Finally, the horse quit after about, I don't know, a dozen jumps. And he looked up and he goes,
That's
"See,
a lot of
this
jumps
happens all
too.
the, yo, that's a lot." And he goes, "See, this happens all the time." And of course, I'm encouraging me. I think you got him, Dad. Keep him on him. You're doing okay. But then he gets stopped and he looks up and blood is running out of his nose. He was snapping his head so hard. I was like,
It's not good.
"Oh, that's kind of that's a hard crow hop. That's
Yeah.
bordering on a kind of a different kind of buck. But man, when you're snapping a man's head like that, and you make his nose bleed, that's a pretty good pounding."
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I didn't want to be on that horse doing that. I can see
Yeah, I
how rough
believe it.
that was. So,
And then kind of to finish up what I asked originally, some of the implementations and the actions involved with breaking a horse versus training one. I think of like you said, kind of bucking it out of them, um snubbing them down. What are some other ones? And maybe you can explain the bucking them out of it, like you can understand that one, but what's snubbing them down, and then what are some other stuff, and can you explain that?
well, there's a lot of round corrals, small round corrals that had a big post in the center of it, a snubbing post, and they would literally just tie that horse up close and then just start, flogging it with a slicker or a grain sack, and it's called the sacking process. But that horse is scared to death doing that, and you're just forcing them. They can't get away, and pretty soon they just give up. They give in. Well, my way of sacking a horse is I'll go out there and I'll rub them down with it, a soft blanket to begin with. It's got like another horse's smell on it that I've used under a blanket. Got some horse sweat on it, some hair, and I let them smell it first. And then I'm just rubbing them down, and I'm rubbing them gently, and all over their body and their face and their nose. I introduce it to them, and I do that equally on both sides. And then, pretty soon I'm starting just flopping on them, and just wrapping around their legs and throw it at them. You just increase that a little bit all the time, that energy that goes into it, and kind of pretty soon, next thing you know, you can kind of flog it on them, and you can hit them with it, and you can bounce it around their legs, and you can throw it over them and put it over their head. Where I've eliminated all that snubbing and that distrust, now they're trusting me and they're allowing me to do it because they're just standing there. And a lot of times they'll be so relaxed they've caught a hind leg cocked. They're like, "Yeah, okay, no big deal." That's one good example of the difference between that. Um, Putting a Scotch hobble on, which is tying up a hind leg, putting a rope around their neck that doesn't choke them down, and then reaching down and putting a rope around their hind hock, and then wrapping that up, and so they can't kick you with that, or can't. They're basically on three legs, and that one's pulled up off the ground. I've heard people call jipping them around, and Scotch hobble, and all kinds of different terms, but you're restraining that horse, and they can't move. And so they stand there and move around a little bit, but they fall down or they'll try to pick themselves up with that foot. Again, puts them into a fear mode. And that's not what I'm looking to do. I don't even have to do that if my stacking is adequate. And that's a lot of times they'll sack that way as well. Or put a saddle on for the first time. And that's just an extension of saddling. Of sacking. If I sack really well, that saddle goes on, it's a little bit bigger, it's heavier, and you introduce it to them slow. Next thing you know, you're just pulling it off their hind end or you're throwing it off the other side and it hits the ground and they just stand there. They're like, oh, okay, I know what this is. So it's about familiarization and desensitization instead of desensitization through terrorization. I mean, it's
That's
because
probably
that's
a good way to put that.
yeah, you can see the fear in horses when you do that. When you restrain them, horses are claustrophobic. They don't want to be restrained and they don't want to be enclosed. And when you can, overcome that through gentler means, you're way better off. Tying their feet, jerking them down, jerking them off their feet, roping their front feet and jerking them down. I mean, holding them down. There's all kinds of stuff. Now you can get a horse to lay down. We've done that, but it's after we've been training them. They trust you to lay them down. And you can pull them right down and you just lift a foot up, back them up, pull their nose down, and they'll just lay right down for you. They won't like it at first. They're like, ooh, but you let them back up, praise them for it. And pretty soon you can just touch them and they'll just lay right down for you. When you pull a horse down, they may or may not get that really well easily. That's can be a fight. And why would you want to do that? Why would you want to instill fear or the unknown into a horse? So another example of kind of the old school breaking them versus training.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you for that. And we'll put it out to pasture.